Alright, this is your Project 2 critique. We're going to start with Amy in this video. We'll do 2 or 3 here. Let's see, let's click on your albums. And get to your shutter speed images. Alright, we have a number of images to look at. We'll start down here. Look at this one. Nice composition, nice selective use of color. I'd almost back off a little bit, like the red just seems so intense compared to the desaturated rest of the image. It would probably have almost a more harmonious yet impactful thing if we reduce that saturation by like 50%. But I really like the image and like how you're using the selective color. Here we are, slower shutter speed. You got those, little players, soccer players, little whirling around there, and I like the contrast between this and this. But in the end, nothing is truly sharp in the image, and I don't think it really matter. Like the composition, I mean, the composition's fine. It just doesn't all come together to me for as far as a great photograph. But as far as exploring shutter speed, yeah, it's a nice exploration of what a slow shutter speed can offer and create this nice contrast between the blur and the sharp. Though in the end, nothing's really sharp. So anyways, we'll move on from this image. Here is, here we have a grayscale version. I don't know if we have a color version, but the grayscale version, we do have the sharp, and we do have 2 spinning things, and I like it better there. Also, the other thing is the color in this image seems almost, I don't know, somehow off. It doesn't seem overly saturated. Maybe I just don't like it. Maybe I like the grayscale better in the end. But I like this image better. We have something sharp. We have the blur working. The out of focus information doesn't bother me here because we do have an area of focus, and it's contrasted nicely with the blur of movement. So it works better. In the end, I don't know if just doesn't create maybe it's just subject matter, as I said before. It's just not a great photograph, but it is an interesting photograph. Though, it's difficult to create a great photograph, like it's difficult to create great anything. So, and our emphasis certainly with this project was exploration, understanding the camera, and you're exhibiting that. All right, so now we get to something more fun. I would say painting with light in these 2. And we have a sparkler, which creates such a distinct and different texture of light than most light sources that we have. I like the composition, like the figure here in the middle, and this little bit of light at the top. I do wish I had a little bit more environmental information. It looks like perhaps you've played with this image and took it into some post-processing software and I would guess push the contrast and maybe push the saturation maybe a little bit. I'd say mostly contrast, but I could be wrong on that. And maybe we lost information that was here in the earlier things. I would like to see just a little bit of environment. But overall, I like the composition, I like the structure. I like this image here. I don't get the environment in this image, but it doesn't bother me for some reason in this composition. And maybe it's because everything else is working well and harmonious, because I like the fact that we have this little bit of blue here and we have the blue shirt. It really connects me to these 2 distinct objects in the photograph. And they're very different. Here's the objective figure, a boy, I'm guessing. Could be a girl, short hair, whatever, child. And so we have that figure, very distinctive. We have this subjective element out here, but it also has that blue, so it connects me back to the figure. So, and also the framing and the circle here kind of creates a concentric around. If we look at the head as the center of this, there's a nice interaction between the light and the figure and the subject. And I don't really need any more than that. I don't really ask for anything more than that. And maybe here I do want something more because I don't know why. But I just do. The space down here seems empty, and here everything's activated, interesting, and working together. So let's see. We have a photograph of Jesus. I don't know if this is painting with light or if it's just that sharp object. 1/60th of a second. Do we get a flash? No, the flash did fire. So, and the color is really subtle and interesting in this image, and I'm assuming it is as it was, and we're also selective use of color because I noticed the background is grayscale. And it didn't even connect to me right away because there's a harmony between the softness of the color here and the de-emphasizing negative space, out of focus, and grayscale pushes this forward. So it's a well thought out and I think well planned image. Here is a nice, again, use of selective color. Though again, I think there's a little over intensity of saturation because everything else is desaturated. You don't need that much saturation. So we can back off on that. But I think it works out pretty well. The grayscale. I like how zoomed in we are. I don't see the sky, I just see this garage door, this brick wall, this road. And we also seen a selective focus. I don't know if that was part of the post-processing where we softened all that stuff and left this sharp. But overall, the structure works pretty well as we look at this. Now here we have some action, motion, water, the child, and splashing of water, and I really like that texture of the water. I wish I could see it better. I don't know if you. I'm gonna guess that you altered it post-processing. I would say increase the intensity. I would actually have edited to actually exaggerate the splashing and the figure and all of that, and I kind of lose that. And that's the stuff that I want to see. My attention's actually back here in the background, looking at the foliage and the flowers, the reds and the greens and the contrast of those in hue, and so I actually want the focus to be in the foreground here. So your editing kind of de-emphasize what I want to look at. That creates some tension in there. That could actually be utilized in an effective manner. But my first instinct here is I want to see this, and I'll pull out more contrast there and de-emphasize that stuff back down there and put the emphasis here. But that's my sort of personal opinion. I'd be curious to hear how other people felt. All right, so we have another painting with light image. Was there another one earlier? Yeah, these were painting with light. I actually like the other two better. This becomes just kind of, jiggly lines and stuff, and I'm not as engaged with it. One of my things, if you watch some of the other videos, is I like with painting light, it's that chance to have that subjective interact with the objective. And we think of photographs as objective things. We're photographing a thing, and that's what it is, and that's that moment in time. And not that we can't manipulate that, but that's baseline interaction or thought process with the photograph. And here I mean I have some other stuff, but it's so abstract I don't really know what it is, and it doesn't engage me to look and think and interact. I'm just kind of like painting with light, and I'm moving on. I thought the other two images were much stronger in that regard. Really like this image. You seem to have fun with the selective color, and here I think you found a nice balance. I like overall. I just like the image structure. I like the mirror and the framing the landscape, and then the mirror looking back at the landscape behind you, and then I like the soft and subtle colors that we have in that landscape. And the juxtaposition. This is a really nice photograph, I would say. And I think the editing actually improved it. I like that there's a little bit more information. It's a little bit softer out here. Here it's just, it's so dark that I want to lighten it up. I think this image could actually work in color without the selective colorization. But here you've got everything working together. With this image, there's more that could be done or should be done. This is another nice painting with light, and again, you have fun with selective color, and I think it works. I like that all the lines and the circles, interact shape-wise with the position of the figure. These lines, curvilinear lines, the overall figures in this sort of curvilinear diagonal line. Then we have the circles, which are right next to the head and overlap it, and create some interesting spatial relationships. Sometimes painting with light comes across as flat, but we do get some space in this image, so I think that works. All right, here we have nice stop action. I think this is a really good use of selective color. I like the pool, that line, and the blue shorts, and the figure, and it's nicely composed. I like how tight it is. It's tight, but it's not so tight. I get a context, but I'm not distracted by anything. There's a nice balance in this composition. Well done. I like the other ones better. This one's all right. I don't know. I mean, it's a little different than some of the others. But I'd say in the end, good job exploring these technical things, and I think you've also created some nice photographs. It seems like you really enjoy the selective color, so I don't know if that's something you're looking at for your final portfolio, but we definitely need to be thinking about our final portfolio. I don't remember what your thoughts were, but all right. Anyways, so there you go, Amy. I'm going to move on and critique Molly's work in this. I really do like these two. They jump out to me with this. I like the color. I think I really like the black and white. I don't know. Everything comes together. There's a nice contrast of color between the red and the green in this image. But for some reason, everything to me just works in this grayscale. I like that. Maybe it's the emphasis on the texture. I like the softness of the texture. That the dress has such a nice texture that's created from the movement of it. And then the softness of this. And you know, I just really enjoy it. And there's some sharpness here, like there's a really distinct sharp edge right here on the figure. And then everything else in this image is soft, including within the figure itself. But I really like how it's contrasted by that really sharp edge there. It's a really nice photograph. You know, some people might actually prefer the color one, and I can see it and why, but I really react positively towards it in this completely neutral grayscale imagery. All right, let's look at this image. There's a number of things I like. This seems almost voyeuristic, worm eye perspective. I like how it's cropped. Like it feels fairly tight, but there's also a fair amount of space, and I guess you had a wide angle lens with this. Yeah, 18 millimeters, so you had a wide angle lens, 3.2 seconds, fairly narrow depth of field, out of focus here, sharpness back here, seems back out of focus here. I like how the figure is really blurry, but there's enough here. I can see the feet, I can see like a calf here, you know, get a sense of those legs and multiplicity of that. But I also like how the color scheme flows. Like the wall here is this sort of neutral tannish brown, and then we have the skin tone here, and then we have the browns here, which are very close to the skin tones, not quite as red. But overall, also there's this neutrality in this image, but there's also some soft color, hue, saturation things that work and flow in this image. In the end, it almost feels like a dollhouse to me. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's that super wide angle of things, and then the exaggerated, shrinking of this thing. Big floor, smaller, stove cupboards. It has a sort of dollhouse feel to it, but I can really see the actual, full scale and the abstractness of the legs. Yeah, I'm kind of intrigued by the photograph. I think it works in grayscale. I think it works in color. I think it works both ways. I don't know that one's necessarily better or worse than the others. The one thing that struck me when I was looking at these painting with light, the one thing you did really well at with this image, and I think I actually kind of like the soft color here, the soft saturation. This one works too, but I like it a little bit softer. But what really stands out to me is the space. So often with painting with light, it feels flat. Like I often have this light right in front of me, and then there's something behind it. But here I like that there's this thing in front, and then there's the light, and this light moving off the side, and it creates a very definitive space that I think is often lost when people first start experimenting with painting with light. But you maintain that rather well. And these are all the same composition, and the grayscale I think works, but I really kind of like this one. I like the soft saturation in the color. I think it's well done. This is another painting with light or time or motion or whatever it is. It has a nice feel to it. I love the repetition of this word or whatever it is and the different colors that it appears in. Now I get this little bit of environmental information. It's very unsettling, almost surrealistic sort of image. Feels almost collage-y, but I get some sense of environment and photographicness to it. And I appreciate the balance of all of those things. Yeah, here's the grayscale. I think it works in grayscale too. It's interesting, some of this background information almost pops out more than in the color. And so it seems just as effective grayscale, but it has different things it offers. Here's another image, kitchen image. Maybe you're doing a kitchen portfolio. I find this image also intriguing. Again, you have this really wide angle element to it. Maybe you need to stick a Barbie in the foreground that would be as large as the figure. I don't know. Because of that dollhouse thing I was talking about earlier. No, I like the image. It feels like just an everyday kitchen, but then you have this very ghosty sort of figure in there. It adds the extra element. And we have this wide angle, and everything sort of converges at that figure. So I think helps emphasize that. We got some clutter, as most of us have in our kitchen. But it doesn't just distract. It kind of adds an authenticity to the image. So again, I like this image. I like both the kitchen images. And again, it works color, it works grayscale. So, all right, well, it looks like we covered everything there, Molly. So I'm going to move along and do one more critique in this video. And we're going to look at Megan's work. She has her shutter speed explorations here. We'll start with Curious George image. Things are kind of blurry, they're moving. We have a low light situation. Slow shutter speed is going to be my guess. Yeah, 2 full seconds. That's a very long exposure. I'm trying to decide if I, appreciate how it is, if I want something sharp. There's an action and emotion, which I kind of like. There is enough, perhaps, sharpness in there with Curious George there and the hand. There's also some blurriness. I don't know. In the end, I'm not quite sure how I feel about it. This one I like, though. Here I like the sharp, and I like the soft. I like that you can see this hand, but it also has a blur to it, and then there's a blurriness to this. This is kind of an interesting image in a lot of different ways. Like there's this hypersaturation and this sort of desaturation out here, the sharp and the soft. There's a lot of contrast between what's going on here and what's going on out here. But they also work. There's like this something tying them together. Maybe it's the framing. It's just that this thing holding that center and then that lower. And then there's all this action out here. So we have this sort of static, active area around it. There's a nice balance between those things, and it has that sort of jarring effect, like the whole, the cranking the box and the jack in the box popping out and freaking you out a little bit, scaring you a little bit. There's a little bit of darkness and a child psychology, scary sort of thing going on here, and also this very innocent-looking bear and the hyper-colored rainbow box. And then you get out here and you get some edginess, which I appreciate, that contrast and the balance both conceptually and visually in the photograph. Yes, I like this photograph. Here's a nice panning image. So we got the figure in the middle, contrast. I like the bold, patterny suit, and then the organics, and then the blur, and then the sharpness. I think it's an interesting photograph. I don't know that it's a great photograph, but it's certainly an interesting photograph, and that's one of those things we're doing. I like it, I think, better than most panning. I almost like it better in black and white. I don't know if everything just flows together or if he pops more, but also creates more harmony because we don't have that dissonance between the colors. I don't know. It's good. Certainly a good panning photograph. And now we're painting with light. And we are certainly creating an interesting form with light. I mean, this is a lot of stuff going on here, and I like there's a contrast in this line and this circle quality. But if you paid attention and heard me talk about painting with light, one of the things that I like, and maybe I should emphasize this in the introduction of this project, I like that interaction between the subjective and objective, and here I'm left with all subjective, and I have nothing to grab on in a sort of real sense as to what it is. So I'm left with an interesting composition, interesting light, feels sort of abstract and expression-y, but in the end leaves me a little bit flat. I want some interaction. I actually prefer the color a little bit more because there's a little more going on. Though we do get a better texture, and that is, I think, the biggest difference between a color photograph and a black and white photograph. Color, the emphasis is almost always on color. Black and white, the emphasis gets shifted from color to texture since we have no hue to look at. So there's a nice texture here. But again, I want something more. I want to see a tree or a person or a figure or something else going on to juxtapose this wonderfully created, subjective light form that you've created. I have nothing to juxtapose it with. And therefore I'm like, well, it's kind of interesting, but I'm ready to move on. So, All right, well, those are my thoughts here. We're going to end this video